Well, hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Sean Pepin, and I'm a regional coordinator for Guided Pathways in the LA and Orange County region. Just to give you a little bit of background, the purpose of the rapid webinars is to give some really quick, brief information about a new innovative practices that have shown success towards increasing completion and eliminating equity gaps. And so just as a reminder, all of these rapid webinars are recorded and transcribed. Typically within about 1 day, we send out those recordings and transcriptions. We also post them on the Vision Resource Center, so you can always find them there. All of our past rapid webinars are located there. If you go into the Vision Resource Center, type in rapid webinar at the top, you'll go ahead and you'll be able to see the other rapid webinars that we've done. Just as a quick comment, if you have questions or want to bring something up for the presenter, please feel free to do that in the sidebar chat. You should all have access to be able to do that. We'll do Q&A at the end and we will grab questions from there. With that, I will go ahead and turn this over to my wonderful colleague, Stacy Teeters, who will introduce our speaker.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stacy Teeters, and I'm one of the Guided Pathways regional coordinators for the San Diego Imperial area, along with my colleague who's also on today's call, Wendy Smith. I have the pleasure today of introducing Dr. Tammy Marshall from Cuyamaca College, one of the amazing colleges here in the San Diego Imperial region. So Tammy has been a math faculty member at Cuyamaca College for the past 23 years, and she is the current chair of the math department with 9 years of experience in that role. As you may know, Cuyamaca is well known for their work as early adopters of basic skills reforms. Tammy and her colleagues at Cuyamaca have worked to holistically redesign basic skills pipelines to recognize student capacity, which in turn has helped many students to succeed and equity gaps to significantly decrease in math, English, and ESL pathways at the college. The impact of their work has earned them accolades. Tammy and other colleagues from the college were recipients of the 2018 Dr. John D. Rice Diversity and Equity Award, which honored their work in closing equity gaps and increasing student success through those basic skills reforms. And this year, Cuyamaca received one of the inaugural California Acceleration Project Golden State Honey Badger Awards for their achievement in acceleration efforts. Tammy is also now serving as a math coach for the California Acceleration Project, who is co-sponsoring today's webinar, and has also been sharing her expertise nationally as a facilitator for the University of Texas at Austin's Dana Center for Math Pathways. I had the pleasure of working with Tammy in my former role as a researcher at Grossmont Cuyamaca Community College District and seeing firsthand the impact that her and her colleagues' work has made in the lives of students in advancing equity. So I'm excited today that Tammy will be able to share more about Cuyamaca's journey to that end. So with that, please give a big virtual round of applause and welcome today's presenter, Dr. Tammy Marshall.
All right, thank you very much, Stacy and Sean and Wendy. And I want to say welcome to everybody who has joined us today. We're really glad that you're here to have this conversation. I do plan to keep this kind of as an open conversation with lots of time for questions. And as we go through, as you were told, please go ahead and post those questions as you think of them or as we're going so that we'll kind of keep track of what they are. Here's a general agenda or overview of our topics that we're going to talk about today. My plan is to go over everything and in about 20 minutes and leave a good 10 minutes or so for questions. That's at least my plan. Let's see if I'm able to accomplish that. To me, it's really important to share with you the motivations our department had for embarking on this important work. And it is because of this that I really wanted to start with this. And so as you take a look at this slide, I really want to point out that while these are our motivations, they weren't all our motivations at the very beginning of this work. Some of our motivations were, as we went along, we realized some of the things that needed to happen, and they've become really our motivations for this. And some of them are really hard just to reasonably think through and I guess to accept in some ways. I'm thinking specifically of the first one, which is supporting student beliefs that they can succeed and achieve their goals. it is very difficult sometimes, especially for math instructors, to because we have this internal motivation for believing that in order for students to be successful, that they have to kind of go through points A, B, C in order to get to D. And that all comes from a very a good place, because we want our students to succeed. The reality is that our students don't necessarily need to go through those steps in order to succeed. And we have to harbor those beliefs so that we can help support those beliefs in our students themselves, who often don't have them. So anyway, so these were the kind of the motivations that that we went through, or that we had. So I want to start by discussing the three-pronged approach that Cuyamaca made. This was done, by the way, in both English and math. While I am the chair of the math department, I work very closely with the chair of the English department and the chair of the ESL department. And English and math, and technically ESL, all made these changes really all at the same time. And so I just want to kind of discuss these. I want to also say that we believe that had we done just one or two of these changes and not all three, that we would have seen increases in student success. But we don't believe that the increases in student success would have been as high as they are. And that's why, so some people come to me and often ask that question: what is it that you think made your students or helped your students be as successful as they are? And I believe it's all three of these changes, along with some other things that we did, but these were the three main changes that we made. Now, as a fellow sort of wannabe research geek nerd, if you will, I know that there's really no way to prove that, right? There's really no way, because we made all three changes at the same time. I cannot say which of the changes was most causal to what we did, but I can say, based on what I've seen other colleges do, that if I, for instance, change placement, I'm going to see a huge impact on change, but I'm not going to see as big of an impact if I don't also then design and implement co-requisite support courses and change what happens in the classroom. So that's kind of where we were coming from. So I want to start by talking about what I believe, as I just said, generates the largest change, which is changing placement and using a guided pathways approach to do that. So for those of you that are familiar with the Dana Center Math Pathways, their very first principle is exactly this: all students, regardless, sorry, I'm moving things around so that I can actually see my screen. It's really kind of hard sometimes, right? All students, regardless of college readiness, enter directly into mathematics pathways aligned to their programs of study. This is one of the things that the Dana Center preaches. And one of the things that when we were first doing a lot of research, we saw front and center as their first principle. And we realized that this is the way we needed to go. And hence, that's why we call our program the Math Pathways Program. Oh, sorry, I need to click on my screen now. Students agree, as stated by Lulu Matute in the 2016 document Capacity Unleashed, released by CAP, is that it's not that we're not able to learn, not that we're not smart enough. The problem is the path. So what this really has to do with, of course, for those of you that are in math, understand that not everybody is going to be going into algebra intensive fields, and therefore we need to understand and approach that as such. So here is the math and English placement that Cuyamaca uses based on, well, what we do. And this is, I put this as AB 705, but it is self-reported information that the students enter. And you can see how our breakout works. I'm not here really to talk about this, so I'm going to skip over this slide, but you're welcome to go back and look at it later if you have more, if you need more information. But we created a 7 questionnaire in the student portal. Students have access to this portal 24 hours after applying to the college. Every question is multiple choice, and it's all self-reported by the student. In particular, what I want to point out is question 7, which is where we ask the students what their intended major or what it is that they're intending to study is. Based on how they answer this question, along with the other 6 questions, the student will then receive a placement in both English and math, or possibly receive a notice that says that they need to speak with an assessment counselor with regards to possibly taking ESL. But one of the things I want to point out is that they only are going to receive 1 or 2 placements in a math class based on this. In the past, when a student received their math placement, they received a long laundry list of possible courses that they could take. And that really leads students to a place where they're unsure about what they should do, especially considering that, unfortunately, most of our students don't see a counselor. And so they didn't really know what to do. And so oftentimes they would pick the lowest numbered course, not really understanding whether or not that was the best course for them. By doing what we did with this, we are able to give the students 1 or 2 classes that specifically guides that student based on what their intended major is, or what it is that they're planning to study. So we then went on to develop corequisite support courses, and I call them support courses. And many of you probably have done something just similar to this. Now, we began offering our support courses in the fall of 2016, and many of you may be very new to this, and I'm here to help if you have questions with regards to this. That's one of the reasons why we're here. So here's how we are supporting our students in our support courses. In all cases, we have eliminated basic skills with the exception of intermediate algebra. And in that particular class, only students who are planning to study business or STEM, which are both algebra intensive, they would be possibly placed into this class only if they've never taken Algebra 2 or Integrated Math 2. Not Integrated Math 3, but Integrated Math 2. So if they've completed either of those classes in high school or told us that they have because it is self-reported, then they immediately would be told to go into the transfer level class. As a result, upwards of 97%, 98% of our students are placed into a transfer level class, and our schedule reflects that now. But here is basically how our support classes are configured and what they look like. We have in math support courses for college algebra, pre-calculus, business calculus, statistics, and starting in the fall, we will be offering a support course with quantitative reasoning. English has a support course with their English composition. All of them are pass, no pass, and non-degree applicable, and English and math run them exactly the same in a cohort model with the same instructor, back-to-back scheduling using a just-in-time remediation approach.
Tammy, we have a quick question from the chat.
Absolutely.
From Jeff. Does CoREC support course count as an elective credit or towards full-time enrollment for financial aid purposes?
It counts towards full-time enrollment. So it is by it being a non-degree applicable class, it counts towards their full-time enrollment, but it doesn't count towards, so financial aid pays for the class, but it doesn't count towards their maximum financial aid that they can take. So it kind of becomes like a free class for financial aid students. All right, hopefully that answered the question. Jeff, if you have anything else, or if it didn't, then please post again. So, so from that, we have found that one of the most important pieces in all of this is the belief that student capacity to do college level work is essential. That was one of the things that we really came to as we went through these things. So we created a paradigm shift where we have, I feel like I went, nope, I'm good. Okay, sorry. I feel like I missed something, so I apologize. Anyway, here is our paradigm shift in teaching and learning. You can see that we have an activity-based classroom. We use culturally responsive teaching and learning, and this is really where we're spending a lot of our time right now, is on this culturally responsive teaching and learning. This was something that we weren't doing right at the beginning. We spend a lot of time on intentional support for the affective domain, for both teachers and students, by the way, because teachers need this just as much as students do. Increased expectations for everyone. Again, that means teachers and students. And we have a lot of professional development focused on instructional improvement. Specifically, we do a community of practice around our classes. So we have a statistics, a pre-calculus, a business calculus, community of practice where the instructors get together and are able to learn from each other as they go through this process. We are going to be doing a webinar next week on Tuesday, and it's going to focus specifically on this aspect, because I have to tell you that the professional development and the community of practice that we do is probably one of the most important key things that I would tell people to do. So we have, as a result, we're kind of really focusing a separate webinar on that. Not that I won't answer questions on it, but I'm just saying we are doing a separate webinar on that.
We also have another quick question from the chat, Tammy. Can you explain more about culturally responsive teaching and learning? Can you give an example of this?
Yes, absolutely. So one of the things that we have found is that while we have started to close equity gaps, we have not been able to completely do so. And we are learning a lot about some of the rationale reasons for this. And part of that is what happens in the classroom. So by using culturally responsive teaching and learning, we are spending some time as faculty learning more about making sure that we understand how to, or what our marginalized students are dealing with and what it is that we as teachers need to do in order to help them. Some of the times I think of this as when I'm in a face-to-face classroom, it is that student who sits in the back of the room with their hood up or with their hat over their eyes and never speaks up. And as a teacher, we sometimes just think right away, oh, they're lazy, they don't care, whatever the case may be, but it's really just trying to understand what's happening to that student. But it also impacts what it is that we do with the content of our courses. And so one of the things that we've started to do is we have an Emoja statistics with support class that we offer now every spring semester. And all of our Emoja students, which are mostly Black African-American students, take this class, and we focus the content on the plight and the histories of Black African-American students. So it gives them some content that they care very deeply for and has really been helpful for them. In addition, the teacher was trained on some of these things so that she knows exactly what students, what these kinds of students might need. All right, so let's go into the belief in student capacity, which, as I said, this is probably one of the most important things and something that we didn't really start off right away with. We believed in student capacity, but we didn't really get into that full on how much it affects what happens in our classroom until we started down this road. So here's a quote from one of our part-time, well, Chris was part-time at the time. Now he's just finished his second year full-time actually in our department, I'm proud to say. He was really unsure about everything we were doing. He wasn't sure how he felt about it, wasn't sure he believed in it, but after the first year, this was something that he said, and it was, you know, just the students more than you think they do, and they can do more on their own than you think. So in other words, they have the capacity to do this. We just need to believe in them, and we need to give them the opportunities to show that, or to show us that. So in 2019, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the study, and I realize it's in white down below, but there is an active link on this that shows, goes directly to the study. There was a study of 150 STEM faculty where it was found that a faculty mindset is a more powerful predictor of student performance than any other faculty characteristics such as their gender or their race, ethnicity, their age, their teaching experience. And let me just say this belief is one of the most important parts of this work, but also one of the most difficult. We have to believe in students' capacity. We have to have positive thoughts about our students, and that everything they are doing is important. And this is also one of the most difficult things to help your fellow faculty as a leader develop. It is time consuming and is definitely not something that's going to happen over time. But it is something that you do with time and with leadership and with example, showing by example. So as a leader, it's important to ask how we can best support our faculty in this work. First, it's important to help create the right conditions in the whole college, by the way, not just your department. This must involve several areas of the college. The most difficult part is the negotiation of the new versus the old perspectives and beliefs. You must be patient. This will take time. And unfortunately, sometimes that time is when will that person retire? I hate to say that, but it is sometimes true. Although I have to tell you that I have a lot of faculty, one of my own, who did retire, but came on board. That person was didn't believe in this, was really not sure. And by the time they retired, wished that they almost weren't retiring because they wanted to get involved. So this work takes time. It is something that you just have to think about that way. And it must be tied to research, and it must be tied to data. Having deep conversations about the needed changes is extremely important. Hearing what people think, giving people time, the opportunity and the time to read the research and to look at the data, to make connections to their own work, and then have deep conversations about it is really extremely important. So how do we support this culture shift in our department and hopefully in the entire college? So here are several things we learned were essential at Cuyamaca, many of which I've already focused on and talked about, which is reviewing the research in the field. One of the things that I started to do as a department chair was send out research articles to people. I would just literally send them out. Just, hey, read this. We're going to talk about this at our next department meeting. And I would just do that. They didn't know why I was doing it, but I just started doing it. And then we really started focusing on and looking at a lot of our data. And one of the things that I didn't say on this slide that I really should add is not just using data to inform decision making, but making sure that you're using the right data and asking the right questions. As teachers, we have a tendency to focus on our classroom, that specific classroom success rates. And what we really need to do is we really need to think about what are the throughput rates for our students. What is it, what percentage of our students are getting through that transfer level class? It's really essential as we work through this, this culture shift and this change. And again, I talked about that, having deep conversations and supporting faculty trying new things and say, hey, why don't you guys try that and let us know what happens. And we did a lot of mentoring and job shadowing, a lot of giving faculty the opportunity to sit in on other faculty's classes and then talk about what they saw. Gave people a chance to vent, right? And then focus on solutions. This was essential in our department. I'll never forget, we had one meeting where we just said, okay, this is it. Tell us all the things that are going to go wrong. And man, did we get things that people told us were going to go wrong, right? But then what we did is we wrote them all down and then we focused on solutions. And so if you really give people the opportunity to say what they think is wrong, but then focus them on how do we fix this? What are some of the solutions? It's essential to get administration involved and invested. It needs to be part of the college's priorities, not just your department's priorities, but the college's priorities. When we started down this road, we were actually right in the process of redeveloping our strategic plan. And one of our strategic priorities at our college became acceleration and the elimination of developmental education. It was a college priority. So then everybody at the college was focused on how can we make this happen? Find allies within and outside your department and work extremely closely with student services. I'm very, very proud of the fact that I don't see student services as a separate area, as a separate silo that we often do. Student services is now part of what we did, and they're essential in this work. And here's another part-time instructor. He is still part-time, but that says students are more engaged and involved than I've ever seen before. Students also have mathematical discussions with each other at a much deeper level than I've ever experienced. And he was also, I have to say, very unsure about this work and has now fully embraced it because he sees the conversations the students are able to have, well, if they're well supported by the faculty. So that's how I really want to end. And then I want to get to questions. Hopefully I did okay on time. And so Stacy, why don't you lead us through some questions?
Great. So we have a couple of questions that came up in chat during your last few slides.
Yeah.
The first one is, did you have a problem placing part-time instructors in this process? So most of our part-time faculty are not eligible to teach at a university parallel course, for example, numbers above 100. So at this point, our part-time are going to teach the co-rec portion and the full-time are teaching the main course. I understand that this is not ideal, but we don't have support at the system level for staffing. And they mentioned that they're at Truckee Meadows Community College.
Okay, I was gonna say, but definitely not in California.
Yeah.
So in California, and this is, I don't know if I'm gonna pronounce your name right, but I think it's Hugh. In California, in order to teach in the math department, you have to have a master's degree in mathematics, no matter what. So therefore, all of our faculty, part-time and full-time, have the exact same qualifications and are able to teach all of our classes. So as a result, I did not have any problems placing part-time instructors in this process. One of the things that we did do, though, was we did have big department meetings to inform the part-time faculty what it was that we were doing when we made this change, so that they understood what we were doing and why we were doing it. The other thing is that as the department chair, because I was the department chair when we started this as well, we have a specific culture in that our department is not just our full-time faculty, our department is all of our faculty. So when I would send articles out, I sent them to everybody. When I have a department meeting, everybody is invited, full-time and part-time faculty. So that helped many of our part-time faculty embrace this, and many of them embraced it. I mean, fully embraced this work. To the point that when they were teaching part-time at other colleges, had a very hard time, because now all of a sudden they were having to teach pre-algebra, and they knew those students didn't need to be in pre-algebra. And so it was really, they even came to me and they were like, oh my gosh, this is so hard. How do I make this work? And I'm like, well, you just have to do it, unfortunately. So hopefully that answered your question.
So we do have a related question, and Alejandra, I'll make sure to get to your question afterwards. From Kyle, what other adjunct specific issues have you run into? Unit load, different pay structures for co-rec versus main course? What types of paid training were you providing part-time faculty?
So because this is a credit level course, the pay is the same. So there wasn't a difference between how the faculty were paid for the co-rec versus how they're paid for the regular class. It's just additional units. And I want to make sure I'm reading the whole. This is from Kyle, you said? Maybe he sent it only to you. I don't see it on here. Oh, there it is. Okay. So one of the things that we did originally come into was the whole unit load issue. We were actually thinking about making our courses different loads than what they were. And when we got down to it, we realized that we needed to think about what those part-time loads were going to be, so that we made strategic decisions about how many units things were for that purpose right there, so that our faculty could teach as many units, our part-time faculty could teach as many units as possible. So that's why, for instance, it's 2 units for our stats with support and not 3 units, because we don't have very many 3-unit classes. So they can teach up to 10 units. So if I did, a 4 plus a 2, they could teach another 4 and get a full 10 units. So we made that strategic decision as a result of that. There isn't any different pay structures. One of the issues that we did have sometimes with our part-time faculty is they didn't necessarily believe in what we were doing, right? And so I had them come in a lot, right? Like they would just literally come in and talk with me, and we would have conversations about what was happening and why it was happening and why it was better for students. And I did lose a couple of part-time faculty as a result, right? They just didn't believe in what we were doing. But to be honest, one of the things that they did is they didn't just leave Cuyamaca, they left teaching. They realized that teaching just wasn't for them. So in some ways I was like, okay, well that's better, because we don't want people who in the classroom who don't really want to be there. So I miss them. They were good at what they did. They just weren't passionate about it. We did have a grant originally to help pay faculty for some of this training, for instance, with the community of practice. And our president saw the value in that community of practice, so much so that she gave our department, along with English and ESL, specific line items that she plans to keep ongoing for the future. Now we'll see if that happens in this budget crisis, to continue those community practice and be able to pay our faculty.
We do have a question about the role of counseling in this transformation.
Yeah, I heard that. That is like absolutely essential. So what is the role of counseling? They played the role of confidant, of helping me understand what students go through, of helping me understand some of the placement issues. So there were, I'll be the first person to say, I understand what happens in the classroom, but I don't understand what happens when the student is registering, or how some of these background issues play. So it was really important to work with counseling to make sure that I understood things, so that when we were making decisions, we were making them strategic so that they worked for everybody. Here's a perfect example of one of the things that happened was when we were working with our veteran counselor. We were originally not going to, if a student was able to take what we call the parent course without support, we were not going to list as a possibility the parent course with support. And our veteran counselor came to us and said, if you don't list it as a possibility, they won't pay for it, meaning they aren't allowed to take it, even if they feel like they want the support. Even if, they might not need it, but they might feel like they really just want it, because for whatever reasons, especially with our vets, they're dealing with and going through so many things and issues just personally. And so we made that change as a result of that. So we've not had any issues whatsoever with any of our vets now choosing to take it with support, even if they weren't placed there. So that's one of the areas where counseling really played a pivotal role. And I want to say financial aid played role, assessment, or admissions and records assessment. I've worked very closely with all of them. And so they really helped us. Another area where counseling played a pivotal role was within articulation, right? And making sure that everything worked or articulated. So there were a lot of things that we worked. Now I just work with counseling all the time. Like they're like my colleagues in arms. We're colleagues in arms now.
All right, so we have two questions as we're getting ready to wrap up here. One is around, does Cuyamaca or others use peer-supported learning and co-requisite course side by side with math faculty?
The English department and ESL department do take advantage of embedded tutors. In the math department, that is not something that we have done. And part of that is because of funding. The tutoring area just didn't have a lot of funding. So what we did instead is we actually would place a tutor in some of our courses, but more as a learning. So they were there acting as a student, but the students all knew that that was a tutor, and then that strategically, of course, helped, because then all the students went to that tutor. But they weren't there acting as a tutor. They were there to see. Because when they took the class, it was maybe more of a lecture format, or it was different materials. And so to help them understand the format and the materials, we would pay them to sit in that class.
The other question we have in chat is around the community practice details. Maybe you could give a short little snippet, a teaser for next week's session around that.
Yeah, absolutely. So in our community of practice, this was when we first started this in the fall of 2016, it became a place where faculty could come together to learn from each other and and be insecure. It was a safe place for faculty. And that was really important, especially for part-time faculty who often don't feel that they have a safe space to talk about their fears or mistakes that they made in the classroom. And so it really created this space and this opportunity for faculty to come together to talk about what it is, sometimes content, especially because we started teaching more statistics and we had people teaching statistics who had never done so. And they maybe didn't understand all of the topics and the content. And so we would even sometimes take time talking about content and not in a negative way, but to say, I understand what standard deviation is, but I'm struggling with how to explain it to my students in a conceptual manner so that they understand it, right? So maybe there's then something I truly don't understand about the concept of it that others can help me with. So it really kind of gave us that ability to do so. So we're going to, as far as the time commitment, it really isn't much time. The first semester, it was a couple hours a week for the first half of the semester, and they were paid. And now we go to, it's a couple times a month. We started that the second semester. We've been doing that now for 3.5 years. And it's really just been absolutely instrumental. So at the webinar next week, I will be there, but I will be the sidekick to Rachel Polakowski, who has led many of these groups and is really, I feel like an expert kind of in this community of practice area. And she is going to talk with you all or anybody who comes about what is the community of practice and how you can put together a community of practice at your own college.
Fantastic. So Tammy, just to kind of wrap up and acknowledging the timeliness of what everyone is really going through right now. We've heard some concerns from people, given that the current pandemic and the limitations of the online environment, we're forced to slow down our transformation efforts. So what have you and your fellow Cuyamaca faculty been doing to adapt this work to an online environment for students? And what have you been doing to support your faculty?
That community of practice. That really is one of the ways that we have been able to help our faculty. And one of the things that we have started to do is have a separate department-wide community of practice where we're talking not about specific classes, like it's not all stats teachers or all pre-calculus teachers. It is all teachers, and we can talk about what are some of the things that we're finding in this new virtual world that all of us were kind of thrust into and none of us planned for. And what are some of the things that we don't know that we need to know. And so really having that opportunity to come together has been instrumental in how we have moved forward and how we've been able to continue that success. I think one of the other things is, in addition, is because of that belief in student capacity, and one of the things that's instrumental to us as well is embracing the whole student, which is one of the whole thing, that idea of the culturally relevant teaching and learning is embracing and understanding the entire student and not just the content delivery part of it, but their wholeness as a person. And really reaching out then to students, right? Being understanding of their situations, that they might not be able to join a synchronous Zoom meeting because they have kids in the background or whatever may be happening, but I'm going to record that so that they can go on. One of the things that we talked a lot about in our department, actually just recently, was how we all realized we were working later at night because our students needed us then. And the reason they needed us then was because they weren't available any longer during the day. For whatever reason, maybe it's because of kids, but their family life made it so that they now aren't available during the day. Maybe they share a computer and somebody's working all day and they can't be on because they're in class. And so really coming together and helping each other through this has been essential.
All right, well, thank you so much, Tammy, for sharing your insights, the journey that you and your faculty colleagues have been undergoing these past few years, and the timeliness of your approach and response to the COVID-19 pandemic. So on behalf of all of the participants today and the viewers in the future, we want to say thank you. We are looking forward to next week's webinar on the community of practice. As Sean mentioned, these resources will be posted and available in the Vision Resource Center under the Guided Pathways community, and are easily searched with a rapid webinar keyword in the search function. So any last words to wrap up, Sean?
I have some, but go ahead, Sean.
Coming, but Tammy, over to you.
I just wanted to thank everybody. I hope that everybody who's on here, their families are well and safe, and I know that I just wish you all well and hope you all are doing well, and want to let you know if you have any questions or really feel like you have a situation that you just need some additional guidance on, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. We can schedule some time to chat on the phone or do a Zoom call ourselves. I'm always happy to do those things with my fellow faculty all over the world. It's part of what drives me, is helping everybody else, because I'll be honest, when I'm helping others, they're also helping me.
Thank you so much, everyone. And this link will be posted, as we said. Have a very wonderful day, everyone.